Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm talking about episode 5 of Creepshow on Shudder. So we were really busy this weekend. We were at the Virginia Film Festival, so I'm finally getting around to reviewing last week's episode of Creepshow. Trying to get it done before the episode premieres tomorrow. I've absolutely been loving the show, and the great news coming out today that it was picked up for a season 2. I love that. I was really hoping that they were going to be able to continue with the series and not just have it be a one-off. The first story in this episode, Night of the Paw, is playing off the classic idea of the monkey paw, the granting of the wishes, kind of having the themes of greed and wanting too much. I have to say, I think the episode was well crafted and well directed, but the idea at the end of the day is something we've seen a couple of times. It's a short story that is very, very old, so I didn't exactly love that it wasn't an original story, and it didn't feel like it had its own identity. It is playing off those older ideas. That being said, I also think that John Harrison, who did the other story in this episode as well, who also did 2 stories previously in the series, did a very good job crafting the ideas around this and really capturing this story in a timeless way. Like I said, it's something we've seen before, so that aspect of it I didn't really like, but the actual production of the episode was really well done. These stories have felt the most like classic horror stories, classic horror comics from back in the day, and that is the essence of what Creepshow is. It's just one of those things where we've seen it before. I like how it has this kind of iconic feel to it, and it feels very distinctly Creepshow. This story also had a little element of sexuality that I feel like we haven't seen. It wasn't overt or anything like that, but it's one of those things that in horror, sexuality is very key to it in many ways, and sometimes it's overutilized. They do it in the beginning of this episode, having one of the main characters be, in her underwear for a couple scenes. But I thought that was kind of interesting. I just thought about when I was watching, I'm like, hey, we haven't really had anything like this in the previous couple episodes. So I thought that was a little interesting thing going on there. The set designs, I think, were really well done. The idea of a creepy old mortician's house. There's also a scene taking place in a graveyard and the zombie makeup involved in all that. It felt very classic. Like I said, his stories have felt like a very classic horror feel to them, and this is no exception to that. There's also a scene where the characters are talking back and forth, and the character Angela has a light that's just over her eyes, so I like that aspect. It draws the attention to a character. It creates a little more interesting look to something, rather than just being 2 people talking back and forth. You're kind of focusing on her expression, her eyes, and maybe her distrust of what's happening while the story is being told to her. And I think that was just a little extra touch that is good. I think is good when you have a kind of a more simplistic story. I mentioned the zombie aspects of this episode. I thought the prosthetics and the makeup were really well done. That's one thing I've said over and over again with this series, is that it tries to use mostly practical effects, and this is another episode where they executed that really well. The very last shot of this episode was really interesting to me as well. It takes place in a morgue, and having the lights change and everything shoot up, and just, I wasn't expecting that, but on the same hand, I didn't understand the character decisions. I know that horror movies and horror stories always have characters that make bad decisions. It teaches you to not be greedy. It teaches you to know. It's teaching a lesson at the end of the day. And having her being told exactly what happened to the mortician, his wife, and then her just doing the exact same thing was kind of weird. She makes all these wishes in succession, knowing that it's not going to turn out that well. Tries to bring her husband back from the dead after being told about what happened. He brought his wife back from the dead. I don't know, it was weird. Like, it was weird that you didn't have maybe her being tricked into making these decisions instead of just doing that. So at the end of the day, I thought it was an entertaining story, a very classic story. Does not feel totally original, like I said, but well crafted. At the end of the day, I can't ask for more, really, when it comes to something like this. It'd be very well crafted and very precise in taking the lore and idea of the monkey paw and executing it in this style. The second segment on this episode, Times is Tough and Musky Holler, I thought was really well done. Just, it is so horrendously short. I was totally locked in. It starts off right off the bat. You just have to go with it. You have to roll along with it. It's not a slow build. It's not a mysterious episode. You're just thrown into the events, and having the mayor and his cronies be locked up by the people and citizens of this town trying to take back their town during a zombie apocalypse. There's a lot going on. It is nonstop action, but it's like, I think it was like 18 minutes long. I don't even know if it was that long. It just felt like it was so rushed, and I love the idea of these stories having you jump in and they're explaining it with comic panels. You don't need to be spoon-fed everything, but I would have liked a little bit more, especially with the kind of slower aspects of the first segment. It's kind of strange that this episode actually stars David Arquette, who's a bigger star than a lot of people that have been on these episodes, and having him almost do nothing and being this ridiculous caricature with these over-top lines and this kind of ridiculous acting, I think it worked. It's funny taking someone who you think is going to be more of a focal point and just making him kind of a ridiculous side character, and I think it worked for him. And I like that this story, like the previous episode, takes on a kind of a social idea and takes a shot at corruption in government, takes a shot at maybe some of the current events going on. It does it in a horror aspect. It's not trying to be over the top or smart about anything, but kind of showing how people should not be pushed around to the will of other people. At the end of the day, it's so short that it can't really flesh out any of the ideas that it's trying to do. I don't know, it's just strange to me. This is also a very gory episode because you have the ending scene with the game show and the zombies tearing apart these cronies. I love the comedy mixed with that at the end of the episode. But again, I keep harping back on it. It's just so short that I don't ever really get invested. I don't get a minute to think about what's going on. And that kind of bothers me. But later on, I have time to, think about it, digest it. I like it a little bit more. But when I was watching it, I'm like, this is it? When I saw the time on my little timeline there of how long I had left in the episode, and I saw it had just started, I kind of felt cheated, to be honest with you. But I will say, while it is shortened, they have to make up for that in a way. And the way they do that is showing a ton of backstory using comic panels. And I've liked that aspect of the show. It's something that's very distinct to the Creepshow franchise, having these old school horror comic panels. I love the art style, and I love the way that they use that to tell stories. And this one leans very heavily on it because you need to move things along very quickly, explain things very quickly because of the condensed runtime. And while I really enjoy the way that they went around that whole issue, I would have rather had this just be a slightly longer episode. So at the end of the day, I did really enjoy this episode. I think it may have been one of my least favorite episodes. It might actually have been my least favorite episode of the series so far, but I think the short stories were really interesting, taking a kind of new take on a very classic idea, and then having this very whirlwind of a story dealing with the zombies and this mayor taking over, the corruption, everything that it's trying to tackle in one little short 15 minute long segment. I liked it, but I just wish it would have been a little bit more. I just wish we would have gotten, maybe a shorter first story and fleshed out that second story a little bit more. Because the first one, we got the idea. Right off the bat, we know what's happening. We kind of know where it's going to lead. And then having the second one kind of just thrown in there, it felt like an afterthought. And I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit disappointed with that. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and let me know. Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you thought that this was one of the best episodes that we've had so far, and you didn't have a problem with the short runtime, or maybe you loved that classic Monkey Paw story. Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear differing opinions. So again, thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.